This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined in the studio by Yeruchim Silber, Director of New York Government Relations for Agudath Israel of America, a national nonprofit advocating on behalf of Orthodox Jews, and he is here to talk about the group's agenda for Planet Albany. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here again, Dave.
Glad to have you. Well, let's start with the issue of serving kids with special needs who attend private schools like yeshivas. State law entitles these students to services regardless of whether they're in public schools or in private schools. And you've raised concerns about the State Board of Regents' process of evaluating local decisions about which kids are going to be eligible for these costly services and supports and how they're going to be administered. This has been pretty controversial in the Orthodox Jewish communities, and efforts to regulate by state education officials have faced legal challenges. Where do things stand with this now, and what prompted your concerns with the latest iteration of rules from the State Board of Regents?
By law, by federal and state law, every child with disabilities or special needs gets an IESP, which is the Individual Educational Service Plan, outlining their needs, whether it's tutoring, speech therapy, occupational, whatever services they may need. By law, the district is supposed to obligated to provide the services. What has actually happened over the years is many districts don't have the wherewithal, don't have the providers, cannot do it on their own. Parents have gone to the private market and found providers, and in order to get the service, they've gone to what's called a due process hearing in front of a hearing officer, laying out their case of why the service is needed and what the rate the provider is charging, and the hearing officer accepts it, or like any hearing, and we'll rule on the merits if this parent is entitled, the child is entitled to the service they're asking for. That's been going on for quite a number of years, more than a decade, probably longer than that. What happened was in 2024, in the summer of 2024, the Board of Regents came out with an emergency regulation that stripped this rights of due process for non-public school students. Public school students who receive IEP were still able to receive these services, but it was stripped for non-public school students. Essentially what this did was it took away the ability to get the lever to provide the services from the services that are needed for them. Now, at that time, we went to court along with 10 parents of across the spectrum, Jewish, non-Jewish, Catholic, others, minorities, Black, Hispanic, 10 parents of child with special needs. We went to court. We sued, and we granted a TRO, temporary restraining order, that held back on this emergency regulation. This was in 2024. Subsequently, the regents pulled the proposal, the emergency proposal, and then it was ruled, when they went for a permanent injunction, it was the judge said it's a moot point because the proposal is already pulled.
Right.
Last year or earlier in
2025.
Yeah, in the fall of summer 20, they came back again, not as an emergency, but with the full regulation, which meant with a common period, as the state regulations are done traditionally, and with the plan to have a 6-day common period, which was over and went from October to December. And then the original proposal said they would vote it on in February. Subsequently, legislation was introduced in the Assembly by Assemblymember Bobby Carroll, and in the Senate by Senator Jessica Scarcella-Spanton, to retain the right. Essentially, what the legislation did was add one word: implementation. When the right to a hearing, not only in the actual service that are required, but in the implementation. So, as I said before, they can actually get the service that the IESP says they're entitled to. Now, thousands of kids were affected by this. The not due process. Now, just let me add one thing. In probably over a decade, not a single hearing officer has ever ruled that a parent wasn't entitled. They may rule on the merits, like any hearing, but no hearing officer has ever said, well, you're not entitled because you don't have due process. Laws are made by the legislature, makes the laws. The Board of Regents interprets the laws. Rules are done to carry out the law. In our opinion, not my opinion, our legal opinion of our attorneys, the Regents' proposal was a misrepresentation of state law. Our opinion of state law is very clear that public schools, ISPs, are created in the same manner and with the same contents as IEP. So it expressly says that the same rights of ISPs and IEPs for all students, public and non-public school students. So this is where we are today. So Regents have pulled the proposal. They did not vote on the February meeting last month. They were supposed to. It was pulled last minute. As far as we know, there are no plans to bring it back up, but it can come back at any time. As long as no language is changed, which would trigger another comment period, this can be brought up again.
So the backdrop for this conversation, and most likely the action that the regents proposed in 2024, was reporting that suggested that there were private schools that were having students requesting these additional services and supports that went maybe either above and beyond what they needed, or in some cases weren't even being provided, yet there was money for them. So when you think about those concerns, one, do you think those were valid because they were highlighted for some yeshivas in the New York City area in particular? And then two, if that was not the right response to those allegations of misuse of this money, what would the right response be to ensure that only the kids who need services are getting services?
So again, it's an instance of taking a sword instead of a scalpel.
Okay.
Just cutting off the whole thing. Their hearing officer there for a reason. And interesting was in the response of the Board of Regents to our lawsuit, they came with a whole bunch of cases of what you call outlandish cases. Each of those cases, the hearing officer rejected it. So that's what the system was working. There was a hearing officer that actually rules on the merit. Now, could there be fraud? Listen, unfortunately, there are fraud. So take care of the fraudsters. You don't disenfranchise thousands of kids, non-public school, Jewish, non-Jewish, minority kids, Catholic kids, every kid, thousands of kids, because of allegations of fraud. Now, we've told this straight to that. We told the commissioner, we told the Board of Regents, you can't decimate an entire program because you think there might be allegations of fraud. This is federal law, state law, that these kids are entitled to services. These are the most vulnerable kids among us, kids that have severe disabilities, physical, developmental disabilities, and need these services to thrive and to frankly to be able to grow as students and to thrive.
So you feel like the proposed regulation then ultimately undermines the needs of kids as it's written?
Absolutely. It would affect, and there are dozens of cases of kids were denied services, that would be denied services.
So is there something else that you think could be done to address those cases of parents maybe being encouraged to apply needlessly for this costly help? Or do you feel like there are enough safeguards in place right now?
One of the things I neglected to mention before, New York City was paying, for many years, was paying $40 an hour. It was impossible. Nobody was working for a very, very low rate for providers. Mm-hmm. They did rate the rate to $83 at something. So it did cut down in cases once there were providers that were willing to work for the city's rates. The system is there for years. Parents are encouraged. They need the services, or the districts should find a way to provide the services. By law, the districts are required to give the services. Let them find the providers and give the services. So parents won't have to go on the open market. The parents only going to the open market when district is not actually providing the services.
Anything else you think listeners should know about this issue, which I think could be hard to access for people who maybe have kids who don't have disabilities or don't live in the New York City system? Anything else that you think they should be thinking about in terms of what this would mean for them if they have kids trying to go through this?
I mean, very simply, if they have kids going through this, and there are many advocates out there, parent advocates. We have our own program of a parent navigator, people who are, their job is to help parents navigate the system, to work the system, to find providers, and then ultimately to go for hearing if need be.
Well, let's pivot to another topic, something that you and I discussed last year, and that has to do with the security for private schools, in particular religious institutions. There was a campaign to get additional funding last year. That was successful. How is the implementation of that going, and are you looking for additional resources as part of this year's budget?
Well, thankfully, the governor in the executive budget really provided what we had asked for $90 million in the MPSC, which is the non-public school safety and equipment grant that provides security services for all independent religious schools. There is a problem because they're 3 years behind in paying it. The SET has been, so it's hard to, schools are submitting invoices and not getting paid. These schools run on very tight margins. And it's hard to ask a school to put out thousands on hundreds, tens of thousands of dollars and not get paid for 3 years. So we are encouraging schools to use the program, but we're working closely with the department, please, to find a way. And they have told us, they said they're putting resources into it, but that's the problem. The money has been there, thankfully, but they're paying now for, I think, 2022 or 23 they're still paying for. So we're quite a few years behind in schools getting paid. And they've been throwing up certain barriers, asking for more invoices, asking for things they haven't asked before. So that is what the issue is, more than the money being allocated.
You mentioned asking for something like documentation. Is that an unreasonable expectation?
No, it's not unreasonable, but they're coming with new documentation that wasn't totally required before. They're coming with new questions on documentation that was of things that have been provided already. No, it's fine to ask documentation, but...
Are they being helpful enough as they try to navigate this process? Do you find they're answering questions and working with people in a collaborative approach?
We work with the staff at the State Education Department. I think they're trying, but at the end, they're still quite... They have promised us that they're putting all their resources into it, so we're hopeful that they will catch up.
And do you feel like the need for this money is as important as it was a year ago? Obviously, the conversations have maybe dropped off.
More so.
More so.
Incentives is on the rise. January had the one of the largest increases in months, just January anti-Semitic incidents.
And how does that manifest itself in terms of creating unsafe environments in or around schools?
I mean, schools require security guards.
But I mean, what does that look like? If there's anti-Semitic incidents, what does that mean in and around schools? Can you help paint a picture about, what this security is designed to address?
Well, primarily to protect the students and teachers within the school grounds, so that there are people passing by, and there's been incidents. And we don't document incidents where there was school shootings or school attacks. This is it's gotten to a point where schools actually have a security tax, where they had to charge parents extra for security charges. And many of our schools run, as I said earlier and previously, other years, they run very, very tight budgets. And it's an unfortunate choice to make of educational enhancements or extra security. And they shouldn't have to make those decisions. So the money's there. It certainly helps the security, but they got to get the money in their hands.
And is this money that is also something where you need to spend money as a school and then get reimbursed?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a reimbursement. Exactly what it is. It's a reimbursement.
And people should understand.
So they pay for a security guard. They pay the cost of which is not cheap. Or they put security enhancements within the building, or other safety enhancements. They submit the invoices and then they get paid. Each school is allocated. It's a per student basis. So the total amount of money allocated is divided by the amount of students, and each school gets their percentage per their student population, and then they use that money to spend within the guidelines of how to spend it, and they apply for reimbursement.
Yeah, and the reimbursement model is not unique in this area, but I'm curious, is it a deterrent for some of these school districts who say, I have safety concerns, but I don't have this upfront money?
Well, that's what, as I said, when they're being paid 2 or 3 years behind, that's become a deterrent, because schools are reluctant to spend the money if they're not getting reimbursed for, let's say, 2, 3, 4 years. Sure.
And does that mean we have like a backlog that's going to result in having more money than we potentially need for these schools moving forward? Or do you think the demand for this money, as you say, 2, 3 years from now, will still be there?
The demand is there. We encourage our member schools to spend it, to use the money, and to get reimbursed. Obviously, I'm not we're not the financial officer for schools. I can't dictate how a school spends the money. We can only encourage them, but we certainly do encourage them to use it. And we're doing all we can. We're advocating all we can to make sure that the money's flowing back into the schools.
Well, we've been speaking with Yeruchim Silber. He's the Director of New York Government Relations for Agudath Israel of America. Yeruchim, thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for more Capital Press Room content, visit capitalpressroom.org or wherever you download your favorite podcasts.